It's recap time. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shower Podcast, the podcast where I'm in my shower and you do you. I'm your host, Chip, and this is not my usual intro. This is a bit of a special episode. Unfortunately, I will be away for a few days, and I found out this interesting way of filling the gaps with recaps from previous episodes. If this is your first time here, use it as an opportunity to find topics that you might be interested in and go back to listen to the original ones. If you are a usual listener of the Shower Podcast, well, again, this might be a rehearsal of topics that you might be interested in. Otherwise, I understand if you want to wait for me to be back. But in the meanwhile, the podcast needs to continue and we need to reach day 365. Having said that, I will not keep you longer. Thank you very much for listening. As always, a like and a subscribe. They are always welcome. And now, recap time.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, our mission is a little bit different. We're diving into the mind of a really prolific creator. We've got a special stack of sources from Chip, the voice behind the Shower podcast. We're looking at 3 of his recent episodes, 337, 338, and 339. And, well, they really form this fascinating trilogy about the roller coaster of running a daily project. We're going to move from these, external metrics of success to the much messier internal reality of frustration. And then finally, a roadmap for fixing a completely broken routine. So if any of that sounds familiar to you in your own work, you should absolutely go check out Chip's original episodes for the full context. Okay, let's unpack this.
I think this is such an insightful collection.
Yeah.
Because we usually just see the finished thing, right? The daily episode drops and that's it. But here we actually get a look behind the curtain. It's a critical dive because it really forces us to look at that constant battle creators have, translating that objective external validation into some kind of subjective internal peace. And well, these episodes show just how quickly that balance can shift.
So let's start with episode 337, It's a Wrap. This is where Chip looks back at his end-of-year stats. Think Spotify Wrapped, but for his own show. He said the moment he saw all the data together was mind-blowing and revelational. And I think anyone who's focused on a daily output, you get that. You're so focused on just getting today's thing out that you totally forget the weight of the last, 336 episodes?
That tunnel vision is so real. I mean, when you're running a daily show, the scale of that commitment is it's massive. And for Chip, these numbers, they weren't just vanity metrics. They were proof that all that consistency had been working in the background, just quietly building up.
And let's talk about those numbers, because for a daily, pretty niche show they are, frankly, they're staggering. The show has been played by almost 2,000 different individual people.
2,000, yeah.
And the global reach is just wild. Listeners in 66 countries, he called that insane. And I mean, he's right.
That's a real dedicated audience. And this is where the raw data starts to become a key insight, especially for you if you're thinking about starting your own project. Chip pointed out that his stats put him above 90% of what's out there in the podcast world.
90%.
Yeah.
So that means, 9 out of 10 people who start? They just never get this far.
Exactly. And it validates 2 things he was saying. First, consistency is this silent multiplier. Most people quit way too early, long before the numbers even start to budge. And second, just the sheer volume of content, a daily show for a year that often exceeds what, as he put it, very important shows might see in their whole lifetime. Persistence ends up being the differentiator.
That success brings us right to this more technical idea that Chip explored, the power law. He mentioned a few of his other episodes on the Pareto Principle and a Veritasium video. So for those of us who don't have a background in stats, what exactly is the power law in this context?
Well, what's fascinating here is how we think about success. Most of us assume it's like a bell curve, right? Where most people are kind of in the middle, in the average. But the power law shows that, especially on these creative platforms, success is severely skewed. Think of it like this. Maybe 80% of the attention, or even 99% of the money, goes to the top 1%. It's that winner-take-all effect, but on steroids.
So you have this huge mountain where the very highest peak, that viral multi-million listener show, is just astronomically high, and then pretty much everything else looks like flat land by comparison.
Precisely. And that leads to Chip's most, relatable point here, which is the practical difficulty of comparison. As a creator, it's almost impossible not to compare your results, even if they're solidly in the top 10%, to those massive rare peaks. You're basically comparing your very successful league to a league of complete statistical anomalies.
Yeah.
And Chip admitted that just seeing the data, seeing that he was objectively doing really, really well in the grand scheme of things, it actually helped him enjoy those last few episodes of the year a bit more.
It's the difference between saying, I'm not a global phenomenon, and saying, I am a phenomenon to 2,000 people in 66 countries. That mental reframing is just, it's essential if you want to stick with it. And it's so interesting that he gets this external success, right? He's recognized as a top creator. But then in episode 338, he pivots completely. He talks about what happens when that external success doesn't fix your internal happiness. The title is Nothing Beats It. And it's all about the most frustrating feelings out there: anger, dissatisfaction.
This is a deep dive into what you could call emotional asymmetry, and it's so relatable. We go from the objective truth of numbers to the very subjective truth of our mood. And Chip uses these really simple, everyday scenarios to show how powerfully negative emotions can just overwrite all the positive stuff that came before.
Okay, so the first one was his WhatsApp nightmare. We've all been there. The app just suddenly stopped working. It would close every single time he tried to open it. And that immediate intense anger was, made worse by the uncertainty. Were his backups even working?
Right, but the tech glitch was almost secondary to the psychological insight here. Chip pointed out that the last time he had a real problem with the app, one that lost him data, was like 5 or 6 years ago. All those thousands of days that WhatsApp worked perfectly, flawlessly, completely taken for granted. But that sharp, visceral memory of the failure, that's what sticks.
We are just terrible at appreciating reliability, aren't we? It's just the default setting until it breaks.
We are, and Chip connects this to our general behavior as humans. He argues that we really struggle to appreciate things, or people, when they're just smoothly doing their job. But the second something bothers us, we react instantly in, what did he say, 0.1 seconds? Without even considering all the good stuff that came before it.
This idea, how strong that negative energy is, led him to a second example: his messy apartment. He mentions that since he was traveling and busy, his apartment, which is also where he works, had just become cluttered. Not paralyzing, but just a constant visual and atmospheric negative.
And the key insight here is, I think, really profound for what you might call mood hygiene. He realized that this current cluttered, negative state puts him in a negative mood that, and this is his phrase, cannot be beaten by the memory of the best, most organized state the apartment has ever been in. The negativity right now always feels stronger.
Wait, but is it always true that the negative beats the positive? I mean, what about the feeling of finally finishing a huge project? That massive sense of relief. Doesn't that outweigh a few weeks of clutter?
Chip's claim is that it always wins. And, psychologically, there's a reason for that. Our brains are basically wired to prioritize threats and negative stimuli. It's an evolutionary thing. An immediate threat like loud noise, or in a modern sense, visual chaos and a feeling of no control. That input just overrides feelings of past comfort or general satisfaction. So it's not that the negative emotion is necessarily stronger in volume, it's that our survival mechanism gives it way more weight. It's designed to force us to act.
So, okay, even if the joy of a perfect apartment was an 8 out of 10, the current frustration is maybe a 2, but that 2 acts like a siren that demands immediate attention.
Exactly. And it raises the big question about emotional resilience. Maybe it's less about focusing on positive memories and more about proactively getting rid of the conditions, the clutter, the small problems that create those negative moods in the first place. Chip's conclusion is that we underestimate the sheer disruptive power of the small daily annoyance.
Which sets up episode 339 perfectly. We go from identifying the feeling, that overwhelming negative mood, to a practical way out. This is one of Chip's more personal check-in segments, and we see the direct result of that mess he talked about. He feels totally stuck in a broken routine after a trip, overwhelmed by a backlog of things to do, mostly just getting his apartment back in order.
And this is the strategic segment. Chip realized that feeling of being overwhelmed often comes from a misdiagnosis of the problem. He lays out this really critical advice for getting unstuck, and it starts with a pretty radical shift in perspective. The foundation is what he calls radical acceptance. The first step, he insists, is to just accept the exact condition you're in. Don't deny the mess. Don't minimize how many things you have to do. Don't tell yourself it's not that bad.
But why is that honesty so important when you're already feeling down? Isn't it better to try and be positive?
Because denial leads to the wrong solutions. Chip's point is that only by being honest and direct and really detailed about how big the problem is, only then can you come up with solutions that actually match your reality. If you tell yourself the apartment is just a little messy, you'll try a 15-minute fix. That will fail because the real problem needs 2 hours. And then you feel twice as defeated.
Right. And that failure leads to his second key strategy, which is to beware of shortcuts.
Yeah, he warns that the common mistake is to describe the situation differently, just to find an easier way out in your head, making the threat seem smaller than it is, purely to avoid doing the hard thing.
This is where he gives a really powerful warning that I think every listener should remember. He says a step forward that is not the right one or isn't done properly will bring you 5 steps back.
And if you try that twice, you quickly get into this desperate, exhausting rhythm of just movement without any actual progress. It's precision over speed, always.
So the goal isn't just to be busy. The goal is to successfully complete one small thing that actually addresses the reality you've accepted.
That's it, exactly. And once you've established that situation, once you've accepted the full scale of the 2-hour mess, the final strategy is just divide and conquer. You break the huge task down into tiny manageable units. The whole goal is to create a succession of events you can actually plan and execute. And even if cleaning one shelf doesn't solve the entire apartment crisis, it gives you a reliable, guaranteed win.
It sounds like he's building these small, undeniable proof points of success to fight back against that overwhelming feeling.
That's the whole point. When a routine is broken, you don't fix it by jumping back into the old, perfect rhythm. You rebuild it by creating new, reliable microrhythms. And Chip even mentioned he values these personal segments because they force him to spell out the situation in detail, which kind of holds him accountable to you, the listener, for his own plan.
This whole trilogy is just such a powerful blueprint for persistence and self-management. We went from the external world learning that daily persistence can put you in the top 10% to the internal world where we saw the overwhelming power of negative emotions. And finally, we got a clear method for getting unstuck: radical acceptance and precision.
So what does this all mean for you? It means that whether you're running a business, managing a big project at home, or just trying to stay on top of your schedule, the biggest challenges often come down to balancing those external metrics with your internal self-management. Chip's success shows consistency can defy the power law on the outside. But his struggles remind us we need that same consistency and honesty on the inside, especially when our routines fall apart. So here's the thought. If Chip's dedication defied the long odds of the streaming world, does accepting a small, manageable mess right now, instead of denying it, give us the power to defy even greater odds in our own lives, just by confronting reality head-on? It's a compelling idea.
It really is. It makes you think about how many of our daily struggles just come from a small lie we tell ourselves about the size of the task in front of us. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Chip's reflections on creation and routine. We truly appreciate your support. See you tomorrow.